Okay, so sorry about that again. The session is basically 40 minutes each, so we kind of have to pause in between and we have to wait a few minutes. All right, so unit cost, that we left off on the receipt printing and the kitchen name printing, but unit cost. So sometimes what happens is these locations want to know like a rough estimate of how much they're making. So on their own, and again, this is something they have to calculate on their own, but they kind of say, okay, this particular option or this particular menu item costs this much. And what they do is type it in over here under unit cost. Most places don't use that, but basically what they'll do is when you um, run your sales report, it'll say how much this costs and how much you're selling it for, and it'll actually give you a profit report, how much you're making off of this particular item. It is just an estimate. It's not something that we deal with a lot, but that's what that unit cost field is. So it takes how much it costs you versus how much you sell it for, does the calculation and say you made this much profit. It's much more complicated than that in a restaurant, but some locations do want to have an idea of how much they're making on each menu item or each option in the menu item. Okay. Upcharge. Now, upcharge is something that definitely affects the prices. I'm going to cover that in just a moment, but it has to deal with the prices here. Let me just cover some of these other, a few of these other options on the screen before we cover upcharge. Bar item. You're not going to understand what a bar item really does until you see it on a receipt. So this is something I want you to set up later on, right? And then see how it prints on a receipt. So again, Joshua, make sure you have a lot of receipt paper, or actually, let's see. Do you have Snagit installed on your system? If you do, what you can do is do virtual printing. Hello, can you all hear me?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Okay, because Aaron messaged and said maybe the connection broke. Okay, so bar item. Basically, what a bar item does is certain tax laws in certain locations require that on the customer receipt, normal food, whatever the tax is for normal food, is printed on the receipt, right? That's always the case, by the way, for them to print the tax. But for certain locations, they want to separate anything that's an alcoholic item. So even though your tax may be $10 exactly, if $3 of that was um, for alcohol, they want you to separate it. So it would show $7 food tax, $3, alcohol tax. They actually want to separate it out on the receipt. To do that, and the way the system knows is this flag. So if you flag this as a bar item, whether it's a menu item, whether it's an option modifier, that's how the POS system knows that, this is an alcoholic item. Okay. So that's what that bar item flag is for. And again, the main purpose is to separate this, the tax and what tax is printed on the customer receipt. Eligible as free. And basically what the eligible as free is this. Now, when we created these option modifiers, we did not enter a price on them. But what if we did have a price on them, right? Well, certain menu items, the most common one being something like, say, a pizza, they may come with free sides or free toppings, some kind of choice modifier that can be free. So the easiest example is a pizza. When you order a pizza, they can tell you, 2 free sides, right? But not every side may be free, because sometimes what happens is you have these not sides but toppings rather. You may have pizza with toppings that are more expensive, and they say, okay, you can get 2 free toppings but not this topping and this topping, right? They can exclude it. So this is how you can do it. When you set that up, and again, it's a little complicated, so that's something we worry down the road. But when you set it up, you can say, okay, these toppings are eligible as a free topping, meaning, your two free toppings can be chosen from these toppings. If it's not checked, then obviously it's not included. So that's what that is. So next one is tax inclusive, and basically whatever the price of this is, it is it means it's tax inclusive. Anyone know what that means? What tax inclusive means?
It means that the price is with tax, or the item is already have tax on it.
Yes, that's exactly what it means. So here's why it's important, right? Before we, we're gonna start getting into prices right now. So I'm gonna put a $1 price on this option, right? This is cream, and let me click OK to save. So let's go into the item itself. Whoops. And we add the cream. Well, when we add the cream, if you're looking over here, there's a $1 on it. Let me void out the other item. So we added the coffee. The coffee was $5, right? Oh, you know what? We sorry. Let's add tax, or else it won't work. Okay. I'm gonna add a 10% tax just to make things simple in terms of calculation. And I'm gonna add 10% tax to everything because that way you can actually see the tax calculation and understand what's going on. All right, let's do that again. So this is not tax inclusive. This is normal. Okay. So if I add my coffee, it's $4, right? It's a little hard to see, but down here, there's a 40% tax. Again, can you read that, or is it too small?
Yeah, we
Actually,
can read.
let me go
You
to the
see.
payment screen. It's easier to see. So you see it's $4 with 40-cent tax, right? 10% tax. So this is the normal tax calculation. So if I were to, whoops. So if I were to add the cream, same thing, 1%, it would add the tax, right? Here's where the tax inclusive function comes in. And I'm actually gonna do it on the menu item itself just to make it easier for us to see. Whoops. Let me make sure it's enabled. So before, the item was $4 and it actually calculated it to $4.40, right? Because it was not tax inclusive. Now, let me log in and let me void this item. So it was $4 with a 10% tax, that's $4.40. So let's go in and add the item again. This time what I did is I enabled tax inclusive function. So when I do that, I added it, it's actually just $4 because tax is already included in that $4. So this is mostly used for bars. So when you go in and ask for a beer, so when you ask for a beer, a lot of times what they'll do is tell you, $5 for your beer. It's not going to be $5 plus tax because the person is just going to hand you a $5. So they still need to pay taxes. So what they do is calculate it out so that within that $5, it's actually going to be, for something or whatever your sales price is, and tax is already added to equal out to say $5 or whatever example you're using. So that's what it does. And it'll actually show up on the report, right? For this example, it's going to be $4 for this item. But because it's tax inclusive, when you run your report, the sales amount is like 3 something with, it'd be like 370 something or whatever with about roughly 30 cents of it as tax because it back calculates everything for you. You don't have to break out a calculator, do a bunch of adding or anything. So this is a function that's very useful depending on the type of restaurant you are. But that's basically what the tax inclusive function does, right? So instead of selling that item plus tax, that is the sales price with tax already included into the price. Okay. So that's what the tax inclusive function is. And it's the same for whether you're in an option modifier or whether you're in the menu item itself. Now, jumping down to more pricing options, the upcharge. So what is the upcharge? Well, I changed the price of this cream, right, to be $1. And let's go ahead and sell that again. This is what the upcharge set to none. All right, let me void the item. So if I added the menu item is $4. Okay. Let me add cream. Now cream is $1. Of course, it's going to be $5 plus tax, right? But it's going to be $4 plus $1. When I go to the payment screen so that you can see the receipt, you'll notice it lists the price separately. Again, it may be a little hard to read, right? But it says iced coffee for $4 and then the cream for an additional $1. It separates all the price. So when upcharge is set to none, that's what it does. All of the options that have a price list the price separately. So even though you're paying $5 for that menu item, right? It lists all of your pricing by detail. It lists it separately. Okay. Now let's go ahead and go in. And this time let's go into the menu item and change the upcharge. Okay. For my upcharge, I'm going to change it to amount upcharge. So it's still $1, right? $1, but I changed the upcharge from none to amount. This time, let me add my coffee, and I'm going to add it. Now on the screen here, you can still see it lists everything separately, right? On the POS menu itself. So coffee is still $4. The additional cream is still $1. All the prices remain the same. But when I go into pay, and here's viewing the receipt, right? So this is exactly how it would print out. You'll notice that when I view the receipt, what it did is do what we call upcharge. And basically the prices of all the options, every single price gets rolled into the main menu item. So instead of listing $4 plus $1, it rolls everything up and says iced coffee is $5. You don't see the individual pricing. You don't see the individual charges. Everything gets upcharge. It gets rolled into the main menu item. So that's what that upcharge is for. Now we did it by a flat amount, right? So when I type $1, that's exactly what it charged. Let me close this ticket. Go into this again. Now this time what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to upcharge by a percentage, right? 1% is kind of small, so let me change this to 10%. So can anyone guess what it's going to do this time?
It's gonna show the percentage of the modifier on the receipt of the whole price. Uh,
No, it's still going to upcharge, but what is it going to do? We upcharge by a flat amount. Now we upcharge by a percent. What do you think it will do?
So it will just generate a 10% for the total amount.
Okay. So more specifically, whatever the menu item sale price is, in this case $4, when I add that cream with a 10% upcharge or whatever the percentage may be, it's gonna take that as the upcharge, meaning it's gonna take 10% or whatever the percentage I specified and use that as the additional charge. So when I add cream, it's gonna say, okay, upcharge by 10%, meaning whatever the price of the menu item is, when I add cream, take 10% of that, right? And use that as the charge. So it's not a flat amount, it's a percentage of whatever the sales price is, right? So when I go to this, so now it's $4.40 because the cream is, 10% of $4 is 40 cents. right? So that is what the upcharge is for. You know, when we do by flat amount, it's going to upcharge by whatever we specify as a flat amount. When we do by percentage, it takes whatever the sales price of the menu item is and then add the price to it. Okay, so that's what the upcharge is for. 99% of the time, you're going to leave this at either none or amount. It's very rare to use percent. But like I said, sometimes these locations, they don't want the customer to see like a breakdown of the individual charges, right? Especially when you're making something complicated like, say, a sandwich with a lot of extra charges. They don't want the customer seeing and say, hey, I'm getting charged a lot for this extra stuff. They just want the customer to see the final price. That's the purpose of the upcharge. And of course, pricing is pricing, right? So again, there's still things that we can deal with the pricing, but again, you know, we can't cover every single thing all at one time. And of course, the link to basically what the link to in the option modifier is to link this modifier to multiple option groups, right? So if let's say I had more option groups, so if I had a lot of option groups and I had a particular modifier that can belong in any of these, what I can do is go in. Oh, by the way, you know, I cannot create the same option with the same name. It's just the way our system is built. But what I can do is whichever one that was created, you know, because if I try to create one that says sugar, if I go to the other option group and type sugar and try to save it, it tells you this choice item already exists. Please select a different name. But what if I do need that name, right? That's how I would do it. Go into the original, go into the link to tab, and then however many option groups you are, you can enable it for that option group. For example, the second one, right? So now you see I can make it belong to both option groups. I can't create a brand new one with the same name, but what I can do is link the same option group to multiple options. I mean, same choice modifier to multiple option groups, right? It's not in the third because I did not enable it for the third option group, but it's in the first two because in the link to tab, again, I linked it to the coffee and the second option group. Also, if I go in, you know, you see right here, the sugar, right, has no price. Whoops, sorry about that. Click too many times. But if I go to the other option group, I can have it with a different price. Okay, so let me do that. Let me make that more easier by using the cream example that we had before. Now, under the coffee options, the cream is $1. Under the second option, the cream, I'm going to make it $2. And let me just make sure that it's selected. Here's where I enable it. So I add my coffee. If I add it from the original option group, the cream, $1, right? If I go to the second option group and I add cream, you can see it's $2. So these option modifiers, if they belong in a different option group, they can have different prices because it can be, you know, again, depending on the menu item you're making, it can be different. For example, think about a pizza, right? I keep going back to the pizza example because it's something easy for you to kind of visualize and think about. Think about how much cheese you use on a pizza, right? When you make a pizza. So when you add cheese as a topping on a pizza, it can be expensive, right? It can be, say, $2, $3, whatever it may be, depending on the size of the pizza. Well, what if you add cheese to a sandwich? If it's sandwich on, say, white bread or wheat bread, something that's a loaf bread rather than a long roll, you probably only use 2 slices of cheese, right? So you use much less cheese. So that means when you add cheese to a sandwich, it can be much cheaper as opposed to adding cheese to a pizza. That's why depending on the option group that it belongs to, right? The pricings for your option, even though it's the same option, can be different because you may use different amounts. Any questions on that?
Nope.
And again, you're not really going to get this until you create a menu and you kind of play with it, just like I'm showing you right now. Go in, create an option, go log in, and then see how it works. That's the only way you will be able to understand this. There's a lot of options in there. Now, creating a very basic one is easy, but there's so many options in there that you're not going to remember all of them. And we haven't even covered every single option. We're just trying to cover, the basics. Okay. Going back to the option group, remember there was the option here to always use this price. What that does is you may have had option modifiers with different prices and everything in that group. What you can do is say, hey, I don't want to go into every single one of these, or you may be running a special, who knows, but I don't want to go into every single one of these and change the price. So what that does is this: always use this price over choice, and then you can choose a fixed amount. I'm going to choose $5 because that will make it nice and easy for us to see. So what does that do? Well, I said that every option in the coffee option group, let me delete that just to make it easier to see. But what I did is in the coffee option group, I told the system, always use this price, and I set the price to $5. Now let's go into the choices. So I have 2 choices in the coffee option group, right? Cream is $1. You can see that here. And sugar is $1. But it's not going to use those prices because under the option group, I told the system anything that's in this option group, change the price to $5. Override the price, meaning use the price $5 rather than what the individual prices are. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Iced coffee, I'm going to add it. Add sugar. Whoops, sorry, wrong option group. Add the cream, you see it's $5. Add sugar, you see it's $5, right? Now let's go into the option group again. This time I'm going to remove the price override. Uncheck it. So when I add cream, it's going to use whatever I created. If I add sugar, which was $0, that's what it's going to use. So you see how that overrides the prices of any choices in that option group. And again, these options are going to be used depending on the type of menu you build. But if you don't understand all the options, it's very difficult for you to build it. All right. So that's pretty much it as far as creating an option group and option modifier goes. And I kind of covered that because the way I always build a menu is always to build the option modifiers first. Then I go in and build all my menu items. Remember in our training, I said always when you're taking notes, it doesn't matter how you take notes as long as you understand what you're doing. But when you're creating the actual menu in the POS, always create your option modifiers first. Create every single one that you think you need, then create your menu items. Now let's go ahead and go to the main category again. Again, when we're creating our category, you see we have a lot less options, right? So the main thing we're worried about, similar to the option group name of the category, name of the category in a second language. And of course, the next thing is really just, we need one that's an open item, but then below that, we just controlling the number of buttons, right? Very similar to the option group, except less less flags that we modify. One moment, please. Alrighty. So the next thing we're going to do is, of course, take a look at the menu item, right? So we created a couple very basic ones, and I'm going to create a new one. Now, again, if we already have menu items, what we can do is use the same attribute as. So when I click on it, you'll see that I have two menu items listed, right? The hot coffee and the iced coffee. That's because that's what is in this category. So let's say I added a third one. I'm just going to name this test as an example. If I click on it, you see, now it has a third one. So if I have 50 menu items in this category, it will allow me to select all 50. And what that same attribute as, what that does is, of course, copy. So whatever I select, it's going to try to copy that item. For example, if I select hot coffee, anything in green is not copied over, but it does try to copy things. The main area where it's really helpful is in the link to tab. So any kitchen printers that you selected, any option modifiers, right? Those are all helpful. It also copies the price, but you're free to modify that a little bit later. Also, the revenue department is copied over, so it tries to do some of the work for you so that you're not selecting the same thing over and over and over, right? For example, if you're making a lot of drinks, let's say they had 50 different drink menu items and they all have the same options, they are all sent to the same printer, same revenue department. Every time I create those, I got to click the same options over and over. So using the same attribute as can save me time when I'm creating the menu item. Okay. Now I'm simply gonna clean this up a little bit and create a brand new one. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a brand new menu item. Now again, earlier we did cover a very basic menu item, right? We even added an option modifier. And again, you'll notice the way I train you, you'll notice the way is I show you a little bit just so that you understand the basics, then I try to cover more and more options. Even then, I can't cover every single option that's out there. Okay, so again, when we're creating it, the first thing we're going to do is create the revenue department. Now, this is beverages, right? Actually, let's do this. I'm going to go in and let's create a brand new category. So this time what I'm going to do is create a steaks category because again, you remember I mentioned earlier that we're going to go ahead and create the menu item, right? The menu item being a steak, right? I did email that to you earlier, so you can bring that Word document back up as an example. And that's exactly what we're going to create, right? We're going to create the steaks. Now, before we do that, of course, we always create our option modifiers, right? So let's go ahead and create an option group. Let me delete that just to clean things up. So the other option group we're going to have is, of course, sides. The other option group, if you're taking a look at that, is of course temperature. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create our options. So temperature is pretty easy, right? I'm going to keep this very basic. Whoops. Rare. Well done. Okay, so we've got our temperature. Now let's go ahead and create our sides. Let me whoops. I need to remove those. Sorry, give me one moment here. Let me do a cleanup so it looks a little better for us. Okay, so I created the temperature, and just as a simple example, I created 3 different sides. Okay. I mean, sorry, 3 different temperatures. Now let's go ahead and create our sides. So if you're looking on that, we have baked potato, right? Uh, baked potato. We've got our salad. Let's not worry about the bottom layer of. Actually, we should do that. You notice that for the salad, we need salad dressing, right? Salad dressing. Again, I'm just following my notes in other words. So I got ranch dressing. French dressing. Okay. So basically, I followed all my notes. Now let's go ahead and create our menu item. So main category, we created a steaks category. Menu item, now let's create our steak. Okay, so the first one we have is, of course, a ribeye steak. It's gonna, obviously, this is food, right? It's not alcohol. It's not anything crazy. So I'm gonna type ribeye steak. Okay. Next option we have is, of course, second language. Same as when we create an option group, category, choice modifier. That's what the second language is for. PDA name and online name, we don't really use it anymore, so we're going to skip that. Now, menu item, menu number. If you ever look on a lot of menus, they might have even some of the examples that I sent you. You'll notice they have a menu number, right? It could be simple as something where it's consecutive numbering, so number 1, number 2, number 3, right? Or it can be something like, okay, appetizers are starting from A1, A2, A3, etc. for each menu number, right? Entrees might be E1, E2, or maybe B1, B2, and so on and so forth. So there is a menu number. Well, we can actually enter the menu number, and we can actually add the menu item based on the menu number. So just to be very simple, I'm going to create this as menu number 1, right? So I didn't go into any of the options yet, but our ribeye steak, I'm going to say that it's menu number 1. So the drinks, let me just do this. The drinks, I'm going to name it as D1 and D2 as an example. So now let's go test the menu number. And you can see the menu number right here at the top, right? So how do you add that? Well, if we had a really big menu, and let's say that you're brand new to the POS system, let's say this was a completely built menu, you might have to jump around and look for the menu item and everything. But if you know what the menu number is, on the bottom, there's a little eyeglass for searching. If I click on that, right, what I can do is, and again, you can change the keyboard to simply a number or something with a full keyboard where, you know, you can type alphabet. So let's say this is menu number 1. I click 1, click OK, and you see what it did? It added the menu item there. How about D1? D1, D2. Since I only have 3, that's all I have. But you see that I can just simply type that in and then find the menu item rather than have to, you know, again, pretending this is a very big full menu. I might have multiple pages. There's a lot of menu items. I would have to jump around and look, you know, click to a different category, look it up, then finally add it. Or I can just click here. So if I've got a list of menu items, you know, D1, D2, A1, B7, I can just type that in. So that's what that menu number is for. And again, if you look on a lot of menus, there is that menu number on there. So that's what the menu number field is for. It's basically to help as a shortcut for adding that menu item onto a ticket. Now, this is different from the SKU number, right? Stock keeping unit. This is more like a barcode. This is more things like, again, a bag of potato chips or a can of soda where there's a pre-printed barcode on there. So if you have a barcode scanner, you can just scan that barcode and it adds that menu item to the ticket, right? You know, your sandwich is not going to have a barcode. So that's why we have menu numbers and that's how we use it. But then that's why we also have a separate field for, you know, SKU number, which is mainly used for adding a barcode. Unit count, I'm not going to worry about that right now. That count number is over here, right here. We'll worry about that later. Recipe, you can actually add what's known as a recipe to this, and it's basically a list of how to make this particular menu item. Not going to cover that functionality right now because, again, it's really not used as much. A lot of time it's more for bartenders where you have a new bartender, you can list the recipe, right? So to make a particular cocktail, it takes, you know, you need, say, you know, 1 ounce or a shot of tequila, and then, you know, 6 ounces of orange juice, and then maybe a mint leaf, and you know, a dash of salt or whatever. So however you make it, you can actually create a recipe so that on that menu item on the screen, they can look it up. So that's what that recipe field is. I explain what it does. I'm not explaining how to set it up at the moment. Not as important. Chit priority. Chit is another name for the work order in the kitchen. Okay. And basically what that does is certain restaurants, mainly fine dining, will control how menu items are printed. Because think about this in a dine-in restaurant. You may not always order the food exactly the way it should come out. Generally speaking, when we order food, the way it should come out is drinks and appetizers. All of that kind of comes out at the same time, you know, drinks and appetizers, right? After that, it should be your main meal, the entree. And then after that would be dessert. So in general, that's a very simple meal and how it comes out. Well, when you order it, you might order, you know, your entree, the main dish first. Then you tell them I want something to drink. Then I tell them the appetizer. Then I tell them the dessert, right? So it's all mixed up. Well, with the chit priority, we can type in a number and it would actually reorganize how it sends to the kitchen so that, you know, it prints differently. So it's more in the order of how your food should come out. Only explaining what it does. We won't worry about setting it up for right now, just explaining it. Also, we're kind of at the end of our current session.